Houston, this is Neil, radio check.
Neil, this is Houston, loud and clear. Break, break. Buzz, this is Houston, radio check and verify TV circuit breaker in.
Roger, TV circuit breakers in. Read 5 clear.
Roger. And we're getting a picture on the TV.
TV. Okay. You got a good picture, huh?
There's a great deal of contrast in it, and currently it's upside down on our monitor, but we can make out a fair amount of detail. Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming. Yeah, I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. How is the quality of the TV?
Oh, it's beautiful, Mike. It really is.
Oh, geez, that's great. Is the lighting halfway decent?
Yes, indeed. They've got the flag up now, and you can see the stars and stripes on the lunar surface.
Up now, and you can see the stars and stripes on the lunar surface. Beautiful, just beautiful.
All right, what you guys just watched is from 1969. And this is astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walking on the moon for the very first time. And a lot of people have seen this video, and maybe your parents or maybe even your grandparents have watched this video. And you see this, and it's kind of hard for us to imagine, because when we look outside at night and we look up and we see this moon, it's hard for us to imagine that somebody actually was able to walk on that. You studied in school, you studied in classes, and you've seen what the moon looks like in pictures, and you've seen all these different things, but we look at that and we're like, man, did this really happen? Because there are actually people out there that have this doubt that this was even something that took place. There's people out there that said, you know what, no one ever landed on the moon. That didn't happen. This was actually just something the government put together all those years ago to let people know that we were winning as America the race into outer space. Because there was this race with other countries to see who could get to outer space first. And so there's a group of adults and a group of people out there that believe that landing on the moon never happened. And we look at this, and none of us have ever been to space before. I know that. And so we can't say that we have seen people in outer space. We can't say that footprints are actually on the moon. We can only trust those who have been there and witnessed it. That's all that we can do. Because outer space is something that is so foreign to us, we just look up and that's all we see. Like shooting stars, right? How many of you have seen a shooting star before? You've been outside and you've seen these shooting stars that take place and you witness them and you're thinking like, what is going on? What is happening? And if you've never seen a shooting star before, you see that there are these specks of dust that are moving through the atmosphere and light plays a part and all these things are happening and all these things are going on. And then you look up and it's just this huge atmosphere and it's so amazing. And it makes you wonder what is out there. I don't know if you have ever seen it, but let's play that. I got a video that will be behind me of shooting stars that are going on. And while it's going on, you have this thing that's happening and you're looking, you're saying, like, what in the world is happening with this? What is going on? So you see this atmosphere changing and you see the reflection of these stars that are going back and forth. And then you look on the lake and you see this reflection and you think about, man, there's something out there that's more than us. I don't know about you, but if you've ever walked outside and you looked up and you're like, dang, it is big out there. It is big out there because you have all this atmosphere that's going on and all these stars that are going back and forth. And it's, and we think about all these things and we think, man, somebody went up there and actually walked on the moon? There's no way. There is no way that happened. And it makes us begin to doubt that this even was accomplished, that this even happened. And we're kicking off a series tonight called Reasonable Doubt. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about this reasonable doubt that happens because it's, we think about doubt in itself. It's probably not born out of space dust, but it's definitely something that we gain in our mind. And I don't know about you, but I have been someone in my life where I have doubted that maybe something had happened. Something extraordinary. I'm like, that probably really didn't happen. Like you think about the doubt that we have sometimes when someone tells you a story. Like when people say, I caught a fish this big, you're like, probably this big, right? Like there's doubt in our mind where we don't always want to believe people. We don't always want to believe the truth. And everyone doubts. Every one of us in this room, I don't care if you're the youngest or the oldest, we doubt. We doubt ourselves. In certain aspects. We doubt people around us when they tell us things. We doubt stuff that we used to believe. We doubt ideas. We doubt, the safety of things, or even if God is real. But, like the safety of things, think about it this way. How many of you ever been on a roller coaster and they buckle you in and they put that harness in and you test it real quick. You shake it real hard because you're like, if I go in that loop, I'm not falling out. Because there's this doubt in our mind that something can happen. And I don't know about you, but I know I have doubted things in my life before. I really have. And if I can just be honest, there are times in my walk with God, believing in God, where I've doubted God. I've doubted certain beliefs about God. I've doubted certain things that have happened in my life and things that have gone on. And, doubting God can sometimes make us feel like we're doing something wrong. And I want to talk about that tonight. Because the way that our culture is going and the way things are shifting, a lot of times we doubt that some things are happening because of what's going on around us, and we are real dependent on what we're seeing rather than what we're not seeing. And faith, again, is this belief in seeing and believing in things we do not see. So it's really hard, and the opposite of faith is doubt, doubting that something can really be accomplished. So over the next several weeks, we're going to be on this topic, working through the idea of doubt. Because how many of you have ever doubted something with God before? Like you doubted God was real, God loved you, God died for you, He sent His Son Jesus, we just celebrated Easter, we doubted that. Okay, so everyone in this room raised their hand, every single one of us. And believe it or not, I know this is going to sound crazy, but believe it or not, your doubt can help you get closer to God. I want you to understand this tonight, that your doubt in what you're believing can actually help you grow closer to God. And you're like, okay, that doesn't really even make sense. How can my doubt help me grow closer to God? Well, I'm going to explain that to you. And we're going to talk about that. Now, do you know when I was young that I used to believe that if you just walked up to an ATM machine and pressed a button, it gave you free money? When I was young, that's what I believed. Because I would see my mom or my dad or people in my family, they would go to an ATM machine, they would press buttons, and all of a sudden, all of this money comes out. And that's what I used to believe. Like, I thought an ATM made it rain money, man. Like, it would just come out and you could take as much as you want. But then as I got older, I realized that wasn't the case. You could only take money out with however much you put in there. And if you don't have a lot of money in, you're not going to be able to take a lot of money out. That's just the way that it goes. But I used to believe that it could as a kid. That's what I believed. I believed as a kid when I was young that when you drove up to the drive-thru window, they gave you food for free. Because we would go and get a Happy Meal at McDonald's. And when I was little, I used to eat 2 Happy Meals. And my mom would order them, and I'd eat 2 Happy Meals. And she would literally, I would watch her as a kid from the back seat, grab the food and bring it into the car. So I just assumed that you could go to any drive-thru and you could get free meals. And then I found out that you can't. That you can't just go and get free meals. Why? Because as a little kid, I didn't understand. But as I began to grow up, I began to understand. Because you got to ask questions. Have you ever been around a kid who asked a lot of questions? Some of you ask a lot of questions. I get it. Some of you do as well. Well, let me tell you about I'm going to be totally 100% partial in what I'm about to say, and I stand by it. One of my favorite people in the world is my nephew. Okay, he is one of my favorite people in the world. My nephew Gideon is one of the funniest little kids you will ever meet in your entire life. But the one thing that Gideon does all the time is ask questions, all the time. But it's not just like asking random questions. He always has one specific genre of questions he's asking. And it's, can Godzilla beat me up? Can Godzilla beat Uncle Micah? can Godzilla beat King Kong? Can Godzilla beat, this clown? Can Godzilla beat this guy, that guy? He always wants to know, because his favorite person in the world is Godzilla, right? So he always is asking me, can Godzilla beat this guy, beat that guy, beat this creature, beat that creature? And then like our most recent conversation is, can Godzilla beat John Cena? And I was like, that's a good match. I don't know how that would go. But he's obsessed with asking me about Godzilla. Can Godzilla do things? And he asks me all the time. Because think about it. When you were a kid, you asked crazy questions. You asked questions all of the time. And as a kid, you ask questions because you want to know something, right? We all ask questions as a kid. And even now, we ask questions sometimes because we don't know. And you know what's crazy is you don't have to give a kid permission to ask questions or to be curious. He's just going to ask questions. She's just going to ask questions. You don't have to ask them to ask questions. No, they're going to be, why? Because we wonder and we want to know, and questions open up our mind. And as we grow older, we learn how to ask questions, but something happens to us. We get kind of a filter on our life where we only ask certain questions. There's only certain things I'm going to ask because I don't want to embarrass myself. I don't want to feel stupid. So I'm not going to ask this question, because if I ask this question, I'm going to feel really dumb. But can I just be honest, as we grow older, asking questions isn't a bad thing. But we stop doing it because maybe you don't want to voice your questions because you don't want to seem critical or burst anybody's bubble. Maybe you stay quiet because you don't want people to think that you're stupid or to make you seem confused. Have you ever been in class and the teacher explains something and she asks, does everyone understand? And everyone goes like this, and you're going like this, but inside you're going like this. You're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But yes, I do understand, right? I did it all the time. I'd be like, yeah, I got it. I don't got it. When the test rolled around, I had no idea because I wasn't wanting to voice my concern. So let's get back to our faith with God. When it comes to our faith that we have in God, perhaps someone in your life said, you just need to believe it, don't ask questions. And so you don't ask questions because you don't want to be disobedient, you just want to believe it. And because maybe if you ask questions, maybe it's not real. Maybe if you ask questions, maybe it's not authentic. Maybe if you ask questions, you don't really believe in God. Well, I'm here to tell you tonight something that I've told you 100 times, is God is big enough. He's big enough, he's wise enough, he's holy enough that he can handle any questions that you bring to him. Any questions that you bring. Because what if questions weren't the enemy of our faith, but that which helped us grow deeper in our faith? Let me say that again. What if questions weren't a bad thing for our faith, but something that actually helped us grow deeper in our faith? Because think about it, when you want to know about something, you ask questions, and when you ask questions, you get to know more. When you know more, you're able to be more secure in what you know. Well, what if our faith is like that, where we're able to do this? Now, something in your life at some point, maybe even today, probably caused you to doubt recently, whatever it might be. And it could be that, that sitting you have unanswered questions, and so it gives you worries. Or maybe you learned something in science that makes you wonder if science and God can coexist. Maybe you're seeing what's happening in culture and in the world and all the wars and all the movements and all these things and saying, how can God create people that hate each other this much? How can they hate people that are this way and that way and look like this and act like this? And maybe you're looking at all of these things and you're saying, how can this even be possible? And it's caused you to have a little bit of doubt in certain things. Maybe for some of us, maybe there's people in your family who are sick and you've prayed for them over and over and over again, and because they're not getting better, you believe that maybe God isn't real. Maybe for some of us, we're praying that God will fix a situation in our life that we made a big mistake of, and it's not getting fixed, and so we're doubting whether God even loves us or he's likes us. For some of us, we might even think God's mad at us. And it causes us to doubt God and view God in a different way. Well, I want to tell you something tonight that's actually really ironic and really it can change your whole entire life if you get this. There are actually people in the Bible that were prophets for God, meaning that they were the pastors of that time that actually dealt with doubt as well. They actually had a serious doubt. They would actually deliver messages from God to people, and these people would doubt God's promises, but they were there to remind them, no, these are the promises of God. This is what God says. Think about it this way. Think about a parent telling a kid the same thing over and over and over again. The prophets of the Bible had to do this with the nation of Israel. The people in the Bible, the prophets of the Bible, had to constantly remind people. And, think about repetition, right? Your mom says, clean your room, clean your room, clean your room, clean your room. You got to clean your room, you got to clean your room. And you're like, quit telling me to clean my room. Well, they're telling you to clean your room. Why? Because repetition makes you remember, right? It makes you remember. So when we repeat something, it helps us remember in our mind. But what was happening is God was saying certain things to his people, and his people weren't listening. They weren't getting it. So they had to have these prophets come along and say things over and over and over again. And so he's telling them these things. He's like, hey, quit acting this way. And they wouldn't quit acting this way. Hey, quit doing this. And they kept doing it. And there's all these things that he said, quit doubting. And they kept doubting. Quit doing this, quit doing. And there's all these things that happened. And then they began to lose faith that Jesus was even coming because of everything around them. So when things weren't going their way, when they weren't getting what they wanted, many people turned their backs on God, and they had a struggle to believe in him, just like you and I have done. That in certain situations, even moments in our life, we doubt God exists because something in our life is not going the way that we want it to go. And in the Bible, there's a book called Isaiah. And Isaiah actually deals with this in this. There's this wave of doubt that is going on. In Isaiah, he says this. It's on the screen behind me. It says, I took you from the ends of the earth. From its farthest corners I called you, and I said, you are my servant. I have chosen you. I have not rejected you. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you, and I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. See, Isaiah says God knows the people of Israel are afraid, but God isn't offended by their fear. I love that. God isn't offended by your fear. He isn't offended by their fear. Instead, God says, I'm with you, so don't be afraid. And what's crazy about this passage in Isaiah, this was something that was said 700 years before Jesus was born. We can't even wait 7 seconds for something. Imagine having to wait 700 years that the hero was coming to save the world. And so you live, and then you're 7 years old and you hear, oh, Jesus is coming. And then you're 70 years old and he doesn't come. Then you're 170 and he doesn't come. And then you're 200 and some and he doesn't come. And then you're on your deathbed and he never came. So you maybe just doubt that God was ever coming. These people had to wait 700 years for Jesus to be born. This scripture, this means that even this passage of scripture, this was written and God's people had a lot of waiting to do before Jesus would even deliver and show up on the scene. And yet we have a problem waiting 7 seconds for fast food. But understand this, eventually the promise was fulfilled through Jesus. The promise was fulfilled. The doubts people had about whether or not God could be trusted was finally dispelled because Jesus arrived and showed up on the scene just like it was promised. But this gets even crazier because I'm just talking real to you tonight in these stories. Because when Jesus was here on earth, things still weren't perfect. There were people out there that doubted even Jesus' own teachings. His disciples, the people that hung out with him every day, doubted and questioned what he was doing. Their doubt must have been obvious because Jesus actually would see their doubt in action. I want you to think about this. Think about that best friend or that one person you see or hang out with every day, right? And a good best friend, a good friend that you'll have, like let's say you meet them your freshman year. So you're with your freshman year, you're with them your sophomore year, your junior year, senior. For 4 years, you're with this person, right? You're doing things. And you know them better than they know themselves. Like if they think they're good at something, you know they're not good at it. They're like, no, he's like, I'm going to go talk to this girl, right? I'm going to talk to her. Like, dude, you can't talk to no girl. You can't even talk to your mom. You're not going to talk to that girl. And then the one girl like, I'm going out for the basketball team. You can't even shoot a basketball, right? You know your friends, right? So these guys, they were together for 3 years every day, traveling together, living together, eating together, all of the time. And yet the same people that were with Jesus in and out every day, they had doubts in who Jesus was. So after 3 years of traveling, they witnessed miracles. They heard Jesus teach. They even saw Jesus heal people. They believed that Jesus was there to overthrow the Roman Empire. That's what they thought. And they thought that he was a king that was going to rise up and cause a war and that they were going to overthrow Rome. But like as they begin to understand what he's doing, they realized this Jesus isn't doing what we thought he would do. And they began to doubt. So one night at dinner, Jesus says, let's talk about this. You ever have your parents sit you down at dinner and be like, we need to talk? You're like, can I finish my tater tots first? Right? Like, can I eat this first? But this is where we find John chapter 14, and this is what ends up happening. Jesus says this, don't let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. See, my Father's house has many rooms, and if it weren't so, I would have told you. But I'm going there to prepare a place for you. And if I go and I prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me also, so that you can be where I am at. And you know the place where I'm going. And then Thomas, the famous disciple Thomas, said to him, Lord, we don't know where you're going, so how can we know the way? And Jesus answered to him, and this is one of the most important Bible verses that we have to remember and ever know. Jesus says this, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Nobody comes to the Father except through me. If you really know me, you will know my Father as well. From now on, you do know him because you have seen me. See, knowing this, Jesus tells his followers that they have a place in God's presence and in heaven with him. And it's a place with many rooms. It's a place that they can go to. And that sounds weird because remember, they think this dude is here to start a war and he's talking about them having rooms. Like, Jesus, what do you mean by that? Like, you're supposed to be leading a war. You're supposed to be a king, and yet you're over here talking about all these rooms that we're going to stay with and with your father. It's very confusing, very strange. And so finally, Thomas was like, I got some questions. And Thomas was willing to ask the questions because nobody else did. He's like that one kid that's like, I'll ask. Like, that one friend that you have that can't keep their mouth shut. I got a question. This is Thomas. He said, wait, so there's a place? How do we get there? We'd love to go with you, but you haven't even told us how to get there yet. And Jesus said, dude, I am the way. You should know this because you're with me, that I am the way. See, if the disciples wanted to get to God, to finally be in God's presence and know without a doubt that God was real and could be trusted, they needed to talk and look at Jesus and follow him. And like Thomas, it's okay to not know everything. It's okay to have some questions. See, I always feel bad for Thomas because he gets the rap. He gets the title, Doubting Thomas. And I always felt bad for him because that's what people know him for from the Bible. Oh yeah, Doubting Thomas. But no, he was doubting because he wanted authenticity. He was doubting because he wanted to know this was real. If we're going to follow Jesus, don't you want to know that it's real? I do. If we're going to be called Christians, guys, don't we want to know that this is real and authentic? So I don't have any problems with Thomas asking questions because I want to know if this is real. If I'm going to give my life to follow after you, I want to know that this is the real deal. I want to know this authentic. And that's exactly what Thomas was asking. And as Jesus' own disciples still doubted God and had trust issues sometimes, I think it's okay to admit that we can be confused sometimes about God too. Because I don't know about you, but I know I have been confused about God before. And sometimes I still am. Even as a youth pastor, even as someone who's been serving in the church for a long time, there are times in my life where I'm still like, God, I'm really confused about what's going on right now. I'm not sure what is happening. But this is what I want you to understand tonight. When our doubts and questions leave us feeling confused or lost, Jesus just didn't say, hey, I'm going to show you the way. He said, I am the way. Because we can trust that Jesus will lead us to God. And as crazy as this sounds, when you doubt God is real, you look to Jesus. When you doubt that God is real and that he even exists, you look to him. Because doubt can make you feel like you're out of place, like you're wrong in what you're doing. And when you start asking questions about God, it might seem like everybody's staring at you, everybody's judging you. And listen, I have had some crazy conversations with people about God before. Absolutely crazy. I've had some conversations with people about God that have been very intense. I've had conversations that have been very passionate. I've had some questions that people have asked me about God where I say, like, listen, man, I don't got the answer, but let me study and I'll get back to you. Let me get back to you about who God is. But this is what I know, that when I doubt that God is real, I can look to Jesus and say, Jesus, how did this operate? How did this happen? And maybe you haven't shared some of your doubts about God yet. Maybe you're in this room and you haven't shared some of your doubts even about how this all works. But if you've experienced doubt about God, how did that make you feel? How does your doubt make you feel sometimes? Because I want to talk about this. Because I'm going to tell you how my doubt makes me feel. Being someone who says that they love Jesus, being someone who confesses to be a follower of God, sometimes I have questions and I can be embarrassed by those questions. And sometimes I'm just going to be honest, my doubt, like how does my doubt make me feel? It makes me feel insecure. It makes me feel insecure. I love Jesus. I read my Bible. I pray. I come to church. I preach to you guys. I try to love everyone as best as I can, but I get sometimes this doubt and it makes me feel insecure. Am I even doing this thing right? Some things I read about Jesus and I get very suspicious about what he's saying. I'm like, I would, Jesus, I probably would have said it this way. I don't really know if I would have said it that way. There's some things I read in the Bible and I'm just confused. Zeth and I will ask questions back and forth, and he'll be like, what does this mean? I don't know, bro. Let's Google this, because I don't know. There are very confusing things in the Bible sometimes. And then let's talk about this. There are some very uncomfortable conversational topics in the Bible. Like we don't want to talk about if we die and not know Jesus that we could go to hell. We don't want to talk about those things. We don't want to talk about conversations about heaven and hell and where we'll end up. We don't want to talk about sin and having to change. We don't want to talk about living different than the world lives and we live in a different, we don't want to talk about these things because it's uncomfortable. We don't want to be that person. And then sometimes our life gets thrown into a spin and we get very disoriented when it comes to the hurt, the pain, the grief, the brokenness, the injustice, all of these things that we see in our world, and we wonder, God, why is this even happening? This hurts my heart. This hurts what's going on. Like, why is this even a thing? And if I can be honest with you, while those things, those feelings are feelings. They're not facts. They're things that you are feeling in the moment, and they're an indication that your questions that you have matter very much. So real quick, I want to switch back to this concept of outer space real quick, because there's something cool I want to talk to you about. Because, how does doubt make us feel? What makes us feel these things sometimes? But there's this thing that NASA uses that is called the Hubble telescope. And this is the telescope, it's on the screen behind me. This is a solar-powered telescope that sends pictures and data from outer space to Earth. It was launched April 24th, 1990, on board the Space Shuttle Discovery and was launched into orbit one day later on April 25th. You got to understand that this telescope is a high-tech miracle, right? This has been serviced 5 times on missions from 1993 to 2009. This thing, how it works because of the mirrors on it. The thing that makes it work are the mirrors that capture the images and send data to Earth. So I want you to think about how crazy this thing is. It's in outer space. It's covered in all of these mirrors. And can you imagine having such an amazing form of communication and data, but never looking into it or processing the information? Every year we learn new things about our world and about outer space and about what is going on because simply there's a telescope that has mirrors that is giving us clues and giving us signs of this is what's happening. And so how does this have to do with Jesus? Well, obviously Jesus isn't a telescope, but when we doubt, Jesus is a little bit of like the mirrors on that. He's able to show us and project to us what is truth, what is real. See, like the depths of space, there are so many things that we might not understand. Our faith is that way. The depth of our faith can be so deep sometimes that we even question whether God is real. And when the world spent centuries waiting to see if God's promised Savior, Messiah, Jesus, would show up, 700 years after a prophecy, and then all of a sudden, Jesus shows up as the image of God in real life, it changes things. Jesus shows us that not only is God real, but that God loves us so much that he sent the person that he loved to die for us. And so this is what we have to kind of grasp with and wrestle with. This thing of confusion and doubt and back and forth. You know, like when you think about it, gravity is this force that holds everything together, right? Without it, we'd fly off this planet into outer space. We need gravity. It's super important. And just like we need gravity, we need to have the ability to know that it's okay to ask questions. Because questions are going to lead you to answers. And those answers are going to ultimately point you to who God is. Because when you go digging for it, you will find what you are digging for. Sometimes I think our questions, we think that they're so intimidating that God can't handle your questions. That what I think might offend that. And it's interesting because we live in a culture that's offended by everything, right? We're not going to get into all that because we could be here for a while. But like things that I could even say as a teenager, like we would never even say now. Like, people are so offended by so many things. And so we oftentimes think that if I think these thoughts towards God, he's going to be offended at me for what I'm thinking. But God is so much bigger than all of that. He's so much bigger than that thought process. And for God, he can handle any complicated question that you possibly want to give. And he's going to sit there and listen. And he's going to listen to your doubt. And he's going to listen to the uncertainty. And he's going to be able to handle that. He's not going to get mad at you for asking a question. There's been people that, when I don't pay attention to what's going on, I ask too many questions, they get mad. Well, I wasn't paying attention, so I had to ask the question because I wasn't paying attention. My bad. God's not like that. God's like, okay, what is it that you want to, what is it that you need? What is it that you're trying to find? How can I help be the answer to what is going on in your life? And, just like Jesus created this space and he told his disciples, hey, your doubt, your questions, all of this can exist together, and it be okay. Students, listen to me. Asking questions about God is okay. Even doubting certain things is going to help lead you to a more authentic faith in knowing who God is. Listen to me. Your questions aren't something to be ashamed of. Your questions to God about certain things that happen, they're actually probably very reasonable. Like, God, why did this happen? So when you feel disappointed, when you feel confused, when you feel disoriented, when you don't know what to do, ask the questions. Let God know what's going on. Because even when you doubt God is real, it's okay, let me look to Jesus and see what he says. Because Jesus talked about one subject more than anything else, and that was his Father. The one subject that he would often talk about is his Father. He would point everything back to God. See, when we look to Jesus, he can show us what is true. He can show us what is happening. And then people will be like, well, why do you believe in the Bible? Why do you believe this? There are people that are going to hear this message and be like, well, that's really stupid that you say when you doubt, just believe in Jesus because you believe in God. Well, everything comes back together. Everything points to one another. Everything comes back to the central focus. We talked about this in the office the other day because Zeth had a question about a Bible verse, and Chow and I, we all began to talk and dialogue, and I'm like, the thing about the Bible is the Bible complements the Bible. The Bible talks about other Bible verses. And do you know that the Bible is one of the only books that has ever been written that talks about itself and say, hey, if you need to know this, read here. If you need to know that, read here. The Bible complements itself in verses that is there. But this is what I know. I know that I want to believe in something that is true. I don't want to believe in something that is false. And I can honestly say up to this point in my life, and I pray that for the rest of my life, that it goes this way, I do believe that God is real. I do believe that Jesus died for me. I believe that Jesus died for you. And I believe that if you are authentic in your faith, it can change everything for you. It can't fix everything for you, but it can definitely change things for you. And sometimes we just need things to change. And then this process of what God can do can happen. But guys, listen. You have questions, God can handle them. You have doubt, God can handle them. You don't understand, it's okay. God can handle that too. Anything that you bring before God, he can handle. It's called reasonable doubt, this series for the next few weeks, because there's a reason why we have this doubt sometimes. And it's okay to have a reasonable doubt. But we can't live our life out of that doubt. We have to live our life out of the faith. That God, I might not understand, but I'm going to do it anyways. I might not know what's going to happen, but I'm going to do it, and I'm going to take this risk and use my faith to believe in something that I cannot see. Let's bow our heads and close our eyes.